Hey there, how you doing? If you've got this sense that something is about to change, that something's coming to the end, and you've got this sense that something needs to evolve or develop, maybe you're in one of these spaces, which I find myself in right now, where I've actually already cleared a bit of a space for myself and I'm waiting for the next thing to start. Well, if you've got that sense right now, you're in really, really good company. And I really think this new moon in Gemini that's coming up on the 27th of May is possibly going to give you some clues as to what the future might hold. Now, this particular new moon is in a conjunction to Uranus. So whatever themes are ongoing from the very effervescent and slightly bonkers and slightly crazy and triggering full moon that was happening on the 12th of May, then this is, I think, a continuation of the story. You know, we are in a time where Uranus is absolutely working with both the full moon and new moon, and that can only mean one thing from my perspective as an astrologer, and that is we are ready for some big change. Now, just before I dig deeper, I just also want to say, like, Uranus is also about to change signs. So Uranus is also coming to the end of his story in the sign of Taurus. And so I think the weight of that is really adding into this this new moon in Gemini. Now, if you're new to this channel, my name is Louisa Munson. Welcome. My whole idea here with Feel Good Astrology is to create astrological content and guidance that can help you feel a little bit like you're not penned into a particular forecast, and that, you know, there's a space to breathe, there's a space to create new possibilities for yourself. That really is my goal here. If you've come back to the channel, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me once again. So before I get going, I always like to put slides on display. What I'm going to be doing with this is having a look at the aspects of the new moon. You know, like what's going on, what is this new moon connecting to? I'm also going to be having a look at the Sabian symbol for this new moon. That's the Sabian symbol for 6 degrees in the sign of Gemini. Now, the Sabians always round them up, so it'll be 7 Gemini that we're going to look at. And also the named asteroids for this new moon. So, for instance, whenever there's a new moon or full moon, or in fact, when any planet is moving into a new sign, I always check out to see if there are any named asteroids that seem to be really prominent in those charts, because I think they also give us an extra je sais quoi, you know, it gives us an extra an extra clue as to what might be going down. And as ever, I've also put in and other stuff, because I never quite know where these conversations with you are going. You know, I never know where these you know, I draw up the charts and then I kind of leave a space for me to just kind of channel through what I think is happening. Before I go any further, I just want to say thank you to everybody who sponsors this channel, whether you're doing it actively right now, whether you've given me a super chat, or you're paying me a little bit monthly. You know, however that happens, you know, some people give me great advice or support, you know, some real encouragement. So thank you to everybody who supports this channel. I really couldn't do it without you. Thank you. So anyway, this new moon, I've set up the chart for it, and I've set it for a London time zone because I'm in the London time zone. I live in Portugal, and also the London time zone is the midpoint between all the time zones across the world. So this is like the average new moon in Gemini chart, and that's where I'm going from. So the first thing that really, you know, I think I would be remiss to not mention this right from the outset, and that is just 2 days before, Saturn has changed signs and just entered into Aries. Now, he's not going to be in Aries this whole time. He's going to go back a little bit later on this year into Pisces, and then he'll be back into Aries fully from February 2026. But it's still marking a change. So Saturn, very, very much about, you know, how we parent ourselves, how we take on responsibility, and also how we react to parental types, government types, to authority, to other people putting responsibility onto us. So, you know, Saturn's important, and him coming into Aries, I think, is really showing that it's time to move forwards with our goals and to take on greater levels of responsibility and to manage them very differently. You know, Saturn through Pisces is a bit of a it's a bit of an interesting one. You know, he's been here for I think since, was it March 2023? He stays about 2.5 years, or just over 2 years, in a sign. And, you know, the sign of Pisces, Saturn is kind of lost. You know, Pisces is so mystical and expansive, you know, and Saturn's desire to try and kind of pin us down, and pen us in. It's kind of lost with the Pisces template. So Saturn, I think, is going to come in really strong and authoritative. And so as we come into this new moon, that new Saturn impulse is really, really captured in the programming. Saturn is in a sextile to these guys, to the sun and the moon. So it's going to be an interesting one. Anyway, let's see what's coming up. So I'm going to look at the aspects first. And there's a few things that really capture my eye about this chart. The first thing is it's stunning and surprising. Hello. I mean, it's in a conjunction to Uranus, but not just that. Mercury, which is also in between Uranus and the new moon, i.e. the moon and the sun. But Mercury is known as being the planet of communication, the way we think about learning, and I guess it's about the narrative mindset at some level, like the hive mind, what everybody seems to know and accept as truth. So, Mercury sometimes represents the facts and the sort of rational ideas that a lot of people hold. And so it's kind of earthly, terrestrial knowledge. Now, Mercury is also a salesman, so he helps us move things from pillar to post. He helps us sell. So it's very commercial. Everything is moving. It's fast moving. And Mercury likes to travel as well. Now, Uranus is also a bit of a traveler, but Uranus is, I think, very much like a higher harmonic of Mercury. He is a celestial consciousness, a celestial knowing. It's very, very intuitive. We can channel with the energy of Uranus, and we can have sudden realizations, so whereas Mercury is about facts, Uranus is more about the universal truth. So it's interesting that we've got these two mindset planets, these two planets that are kind of restless, really with a sense of travel, with a sense of far out, and a sense of moving things, very, very quickly. So this is a double dose of thinking. This is a double dose of a very sort of heady space. So I really think, and also in the sign of Gemini, I mean, Gemini is, one sign that is really associated with communication, and communities and how we all come together. So I do think that this new moon has a huge potential to upgrade or throw things up in the air a little bit at a community level, at a real human level. And it's going to create a lot of new thoughts, a lot of new thinking, a lot of very interesting discussions, probably quite unusual discussions, maybe discussions and thoughts we weren't expecting to have. So that's kind of cool. The next thing that really surprises me, but I realize Aries probably not spelled. I was thinking of fiery and I put in airy. It's got an E in between the R and the Y. That shouldn't be there, should it? But anyway, it's airy. It's got 5 planets in air signs. So, there's a very, very strong air energy. And recently it's all been about the water to fire energy, especially with Mars going between Cancer and Leo in recent times. So we've had a lot of, the Pisces Cancer energy, the Aries Leo energy. So we've gone from a real sort of water fire, which has felt so personal. We've all gone through these personal shifts and upsets and all sorts of different things. Now we're coming into a time where it's airy. Now the air is much less personal. It's more slightly detached. Well, I mean, if you think of air, we can't even see it. It's, we have no idea it's around us, but it is. And air, really, you can't kind of pin it down exactly. It's always going to elude you, and yet we're using it all the time. So this is a very, I don't want to say tricky, but this is quite changeable, but in a sort of detached way. So this is a very different kind of energy that we're using in 2025. This is really like stepping it up a little bit. Yes, and I've already spoken about this Uranus Mercury energy, but the fact that we've got these 4, one after the other, after the other, after the other, this is known as a stellium. And where we have a stellium, we have this intense energy. I always think of these as like daisy chains. That's how I like to think of it. So you have your one daisy, which kind of sows the seeds, and from that seed or from that daisy, another part of this daisy chain is going to get sown in. And another. And so to me, it feels like, we're maybe starting from a position of great change, surprising change, with Uranus, which comes into the Mercury need for us to communicate that. So if you think Uranus is this kind of high consciousness, it's up there to be channeled in, I think lots of people are going to get this sudden knowing, and then we have to disseminate it. This is the Mercury energy coming in. Then we need to disseminate it, sort of download it a little bit and share it amongst our friends. And so people start to talk, and then it comes to the Moon and the Sun function. So it's reaching us at an emotional psyche level, and also at an ego and sort of physical level. Yeah, and you could also say the male and the female within us get really, or the light and the dark. Every part of us is infused with this new energy. So I really do think it's like Uranus, Mercury, Sun, and the Moon, like from one to the other to the other. So this is going to be setting off a chain reaction. Now you could say we've got that energy going on here, and to be fair, we've had this energy going on really since the end of it started in February, like the end of March. Things are really starting to feel like that. And April, with the North Node, Saturn, Neptune, we also had Venus and Mercury. So we've had these very, very intense times, but this is a new, zippy, faster, processed time. Now, the other thing that I think is really quite interesting is that Uranus, Mercury, the Sun and the Moon are also trine Pluto. Now, I've already said these guys are in these air signs. Jupiter hasn't really had much of a look in, but he is also in an air sign. But this particular trine is very, very strong. Pluto is all about the changes that we need to make. Pluto is showing us where there's an opportunity for transformation. And I always think that Pluto brings in a certain amount of fear. Now, as Pluto is coming into this sign of Aquarius over the last couple of years, and in particular, he just moved in officially in November last year, things like AI have really come into consciousness, and the idea of climate, the idea of community. Aquarius is quite a liberal sign. It's very sort of very much a left way of thinking, but also very much about creating a platform that works for everyone. And you may well have, and I've bleated on about this in my Pluto and Aquarius videos, the ideas of one world governments and this, that and the other, where everyone is kind of in, the idea of Klaus Schwab, although he's no longer there, but the idea of you'll have nothing but be really happy. Well, Pluto coming in here has been sort of edging in these ideas that a new kind of equality could be possible, and that new systems, especially using the internet, which I think is a real sort of Uranian thing, and obviously Uranus is one of the rulers of Aquarius. This is a pretty strong kind of energy that's coming in. Now, Uranus is also ruled by Saturn, so it's interesting. You've got Pluto connected to Saturn by a sextile. Saturn's also connected to down here as well. So we've got this beginning of Aquarius, beginning of Aries, beginning of Gemini kind of vibe going on. So there's definitely a push with the airy fire signs. So yeah, this is I think this new moon is likely to coincide with a push of a system, or particularly news that there is a new system coming in. I was watching a video earlier today about the C40. Was it C40? The C40 cities in the UK. Like the idea that the government is being devolved. There's a devolution going on. There is this sense that the power at Westminster is being kind of phased out and moved into particular cities, and that cities would have control. And on the one hand, I can see that Pluto going into Aquarius is bringing power back to the people. And I think the big question is, in these systems where it appears that power is coming back to the people, is it really coming back to the people? Or is it actually more devilish and it's actually bringing a stronger control back to the people? Like the talks on environmental concerns, and also the conversations back in the days of COVID. And I say that in particular because Pluto was really implicated in the movement of COVID and the announcement of COVID. Saturn was there as well, and also Jupiter. They were all together at that time. And this is how far they've moved since COVID. But, you know, like the fear of what might happen, the idea that we might be in, 15-minute cities, and that there might be lockdowns according to climate or carbon, or lockdowns according to a pandemic or something like that. So it really wouldn't surprise me if around this time, and I'm not saying it to scare people, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's some kind of shock about power that stops us and maybe limits us. An idea that is spreading and that communicates far, because obviously that was needed when COVID happened and Jupiter was there to really send it all wide out. It's very, very different programming to the COVID. So it wouldn't surprise me if it had something to do with the internet. But to me, there's something really shocking and surprising coming up that is potentially going to change the way we see the world, potentially change the way we see what's going on. And information is the key to this. Information is the thing that is going to be, like waking us up or shaking us up. You know, it's a pretty big energy. The last thing I want to say, now I've mentioned that Saturn's going into Aries, but, you know, Neptune went into Aries on the 31st of, I was going to say 31st of Pisces, the 31st of March. And so Saturn and Neptune are coming in. They're already in a conjunction. They're not going to make an exact conjunction. They're going to make that next year, I think on the 20th of February, 2026. And that's a really, really unusual, very rare conjunction. But, you know, they're coming into it. They're playing with this. So Saturn and Neptune at 0 Aries. 0 Aries is the start of the new story. And of course, we're at a new moon, which is also another fresh start. But yeah, Saturn and Neptune, you know, right at the start of the new human story. The human story starts at 0 Aries and kind of goes all the way around and ends at 29 Pisces. So it's like we've ended one moment in time, and it feels like there's a whole new story coming for humanity. And you might be thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I want. And other people might be thinking, oh my God, that's exactly not what I want. I really like my life the way it is. But to me, it feels like something new is brewing. And so Saturn, which is bringing a sort of formalized, rule-based idea and trying to be responsible, but also really wanting to have his own way. I mean, let's not forget Saturn in mythology was the god that swallowed his children because he didn't want anyone to succeed him. So he wanted the power. He didn't want to share it or pass it down, or get feedback on what it was like in the Saturn days. And then Neptune, who actually is one of Saturn's sons, but Neptune is about creativity, compassion, idealism. So, you know, and in fact, Neptune in the sign of Aries is very, very idealistic. And so what I really see here is that we've got this set of very new idealistic ideas that are likely to be pushed. And it really wouldn't surprise me if around this time, the 27th of May, with this very, very strong new moon in Gemini, that some very strong idealistic ideas, news, something's going to get pushed to move very, very fast. And it could be quite shocking. Now, of course, that's on a worldwide level. And, you know, I don't always talk about like what's going on out there, because I tend to use this kind of astrology to talk about what's going on for each one of us. And, you know, I can only talk from my own perspective. Obviously, I have clients and I get to hear their stories. But, you know, on a personal story, I'm really feeling that there's a deep change going on within me. I've just had my Chiron return. I've turned 50 recently. So, I mean, obviously that creates a bit of a change. But really what I am also noticing is the dropping away of a lot of stories, you know, the stories of me as a victim or as somebody that was bullied or put down or felt insecure, all of those kinds of things, which really have a sort of strong Pisces energy. They're starting to really drop away now. And yeah, I feel like I'm in this space, not quite knowing where I'm going yet, but knowing that the past is over, and that there is a very clear and new start. And you might be feeling that. And if so, you know, this is how I would choose to use this energy, is to think, okay, yeah, I am in this space. I am ready to make some changes. Let's dream big. Let's use our imagination to create the transformation that you want to see and be in your own life. this energy is moving fast. It's about channeling, seeing new things, being adventurous, seeing a whole new opportunity. It's also deeply, deeply independent. Mercury is quite social, but he likes to keep moving. You know, the sign of Gemini is super, super social, but not necessarily that attached. And Uranus, you know, which is absolutely about your independence and your ability to be your complete self. You know, if I was in your shoes right now, and I kind of am, but obviously I'm in my own shoes, I think it's a time to start thinking, how can I be completely myself? So I really see that Saturn going into Aries is showing us how we're becoming more responsible, and starting a whole new journey with responsibility. But this is also showing how you can be yourself on your journey, like what new potentials are coming out for you. So what I'm going to do now is have a quick look at these asteroids that are showing up at the time of the new moon. Now, the one that well, there's a couple here. One of them is an asteroid, and the other is, and I like this. I just want to refer to this. Gong Gong is a dwarf planet, and I've got the book by Alan Clay. I interviewed him. I've got a couple of shows I did with him, actually. If you're interested in dwarf planets, then please do check them out. But we've got asteroid Persephone, who's in this chart. We've got Gong Gong, which is a dwarf planet that Alan Clay has spoken about. And, you know, I've been reading up about Gong Gong in his brilliant book called New Stars for a New Era. We've also got Achilles, who is down here. Gong Gong and Persephone being up here, they're exactly square to the new moon. And then we've also got Icarus. Now, Achilles and Icarus, I think, are quite easy and quick to go through. You know, Achilles, the strongest warrior, you probably already know this story, the idea of the Achilles heel. Well, as a child, Achilles was he blessed or protected by his mum? She held him upside down by his ankle and sort of dipped him into the river of Styx, covered all of his skin with the water from the river of Styx to protect him. And it made him kind of invulnerable and invincible. But there was one weak spot where she was holding him on the back of his ankle. That's why we've got that thing called the Achilles heel, the Achilles tendon. But it was his weak spot. So, you know, there is a point of weakness which can lead to a downfall, and it's a surprising downfall. He didn't know he had that weak spot. He felt very strong, very capable, really, really strong. So there is an element of down here in the sign of Virgo, there is this sense of natural strength and feeling invincible, and yet there is a little Achilles heel. So, you know, I wonder what's going on there, and maybe we can explore this. The other one that I think is a really sort of interesting story to pull on is the story of Icarus. Now, you might know the story of Icarus. Icarus and his father, Daedalus, they were locked in a prison and they needed to flee. I was going to say it's unconstitutional. They needed to flee prison, and they were very inventive. Daedalus was an inventor, and I think a smith, you know, like he was a metal worker. And Icarus was really smart. And so they made some wings of wax and feathers using what they could find in their cells. And then they made these great big wings, and they flew out over the ocean to escape. His dad said, don't go too high. If you go too high, the wax will melt. You'll come to you'll fall into the sea and you'll drown. But he was so full of, you know, his confidence and ambition that he just went full on. He just flew out there, went up as high up to the sky as he could. The wax melted, his wings fell apart. He drowned in the sea. So again, there's this idea of unchecked confidence, and how it can be our downfall. So there's a couple of things here about our downfall and how we have a weak spot or a weak tendency. Is it like pride comes before the fall? What is it that we're doing that might lead to our downfall? So talking about Persephone and Gong Gong then. So Persephone and Gong Gong are up here in an exact conjunction and an exact square to the sun and the moon, the new moon in Gemini. So Persephone is an interesting one. You know, in previous videos, I've spoken about Ceres and Pluto. Ceres is also known as Demeter, according to whether you're Greek or Roman, and Pluto and Hades. You know, they are the two alter egos, according to whether you're Roman or Greek in terms of mythology. But the story of Demeter, Ceres, she's like Mother Earth. She is the I guess the goddess who is ensuring that all of nature flourishes and it is beautiful. And her daughter Persephone was, I don't know, picking corn or doing something. And she was then abducted by Hades, Pluto, and taken into the underworld, because obviously Pluto is the god of the underworld. And Zeus, also known as Jupiter, was who I think fathered Persephone with Ceres. Or Demeter. God, there's so many different names according to the different traditions. But anyway, Zeus came to mediate and to reclaim Persephone. But because she had eaten some of the fruit of the pomegranate, like half of the seeds, she was supposed to stay in the underworld for half her time and then come back up to Earth the rest of the time. Now, Persephone, she's often known as being abducted, like taken against her will, like not given the choice to make a decision, and then kept as the queen of the underworld, and then brought back to surface because of what Zeus made as a proclamation, and back to Ceres. And so in one way, she is seen as somebody who doesn't actually advocate for herself. She's seen as not having any powerful choice. And I really like this particular description that came from saturnandhoney.com, and it's /blog/Persephone. If you want to check it out, it's a really good article. But it says, asteroid Persephone in astrology represents autonomy, choices, cycles, choice being taken from us, and reclaiming our own wants and will. Where Persephone is found, powerlessness wants to grow into sovereign power. So I think this is really beautiful. I really think this is like a really strong and strident energy for this particular new moon. And obviously this new moon is bringing in a lot of new thoughts, a lot of new ways of doing things. And it is very much, in the way that I described before with stelliums, Uranus, then Mercury, then the sun and the moon, so the channeled vision, the big vision, the stunning vision, the shocking new information, that feeling that everything is about to fall apart suddenly, the vibration or the frequency within us. Maybe we're just feeling that sort of level of apprehension. We then start to communicate it. That's Mercury. Now, interestingly, Icarus is in between the conversation and then applying it to ourselves, with our psyche, the moon, and our personality or our ego and our body, the sun. And so, Icarus in between is talking about the unchecked confidence, the ambition. So, whatever shocking events are going on around the new moon, whether you're in your own internal new choices that you're making for yourself and kind of shocking your life, you're taking a new route. I was going to say route then. Obviously, I'm not American or Canadian, but route is what we say in the UK. It's the same thing. To me, it feels like, we might be about to make a big decision, but we need to watch that we're not just being too ambitious or not listening to warnings. Now, interestingly, Persephone, which is in a square, is really highlighting where we may have had our choices taken from us. So, for instance, there might be changes coming in the world that we feel are put upon us, and we feel like we don't have a choice. Like the governments have said, this is what's happening, or the WHO or the UN or whatever, or people start fighting and there's nothing that you can do about it. And so Persephone here is possibly showing us where we're in a stress point, where we feel like our choices have been taken. And so one of the themes here is, how can we come back into power if we have felt the sense of powerlessness, the fact that things seem to be happening to us, that things are done to us, and that we're not really sovereign in ourselves. And so how can we come back to that? And then the other energy here is Gong Gong. Gong Gong is, like I mentioned earlier, it's a dwarf planet. And, I've mentioned Alan Clay's book, which is really good. Empathic consciousness and participation, rejoining the flow of life, de-escalating rage and de-escalating aloofness. So this is about being, when I was reading, it's quite a big chapter, but the Gong Gong chapter is really talking about the empathic consciousness that comes in and allows us to put ourselves in each other's shoes, to feel what it's like to be somebody else, to really put ourselves into a place of complete empathy where our boundaries are down. That's how it sounds from his write-up of it. Our boundaries come down and we're rejoining life. You know, we're not being aloof. We're not being separate. We're not being angry and like in that place of rage. Like rage, I guess, is showing where we feel very, very separate from somebody. We feel very different. You know, so anything that is separating us from other people is something that it is likely to be dropped. And there's this yearning for empathic consciousness. And so it's a participation, like how you rejoin with life is a participation. And so Persephone and Gong are mixed together. And so what I really see is for us to get into our sovereign power, we have to participate, or we have to rejoin the flow of life. And I guess one of the ways of rejoining is to not be in judgment, which is crazy, because obviously if it feels like from the outside, like our choice is being taken away from other entities, if it feels like our choice is no longer ours, you know, of course you might judge it and say, I don't like it. But what this is suggesting to me is that when we can see what's going on, but without judgment, we can actually start to be sovereign. Now, obviously, that sounds real hippy dippy, probably, and it probably it actually sounds like we render ourselves even more out of our own sovereign power. But, you know, the only thing that we have that nobody can take from us is our choice, you know, our actual choosing. I mean, people, you know, obviously, you know, I'm trying to think back to, I remember at the time of the COVID phenomenon, there was all sorts of discussion as to what happens if people choose not to vaccinate, for instance. You know, so there's this very big push that everybody had the same thing and the idea of a social contract. And then anyone that chose not to was excluded from society. Now, to me, that sounds very much like the people who didn't choose to go down that route were somehow weakened, you know, because they were excluded from society in the ways that everyone else were included. However, people that chose that made that decision, they were making it from their own choice. So it seemed like they didn't have any other choice. Like if they wanted to not go the route that other people were suggesting, that they had to go alone. But it was still their choice. You know, if they had their choice taken away from them, what they would have done probably would have been complied with something that went against their will. So, you know, what I really see here is the way to come back into our choice is to make the decision, even if it feels like it's a difficult decision to make. So to me, this is saying there are difficult decisions to make, but if we're not actively choosing for ourselves, then we are kind of rendering ourselves a bit powerless, because other people will make that decision for us. And of course, there are some times when we don't have any choice, you know, like for instance, if, you know, we were to get attacked or, you know, hit by, oh, that was a bad example, but like run over or something, you know, there are lots of different examples where there's not much we can do. You know, we are in between a rock and a hard place. And I'm not trying to say turn your frown upside down, but what Persephone is bringing out, as I see this in the chart, is the sense of, we always have a choice on how we choose to feel in the moment that anything is happening. And that choice is your sacred birthright. That is something that cannot be taken away from you. It's your choice. So to me, there's a really strong message that whatever is going on in the world, you have a choice. And of course, if you know, again, if this has got nothing to do with the outer world, but all about what's going on internally for you, and many people would argue that that actually is the way things are, you know, that we are actually in our own space, imagining the life around us, and there it materializes. So, you know, if we are going through this change internally, to me, what this is saying is the way to go through this change is to actively choose. Even if it feels difficult, it's time for you to actively choose where you want to put your energy. So obviously, I've also already spoken about Achilles. So again, just to recap that, you know, Achilles is just showing you, even when you think you're completely powerful, just be aware that there may be still a weak spot. And maybe this is highlighted a little bit with Gong, you know, because Gong is saying about empathic consciousness, you know, to imagine what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes and how to rejoin the flow of life, like not through judgment, not through aloofness. So, you know, recognize that, you know, we are all human and we can be aloof. And I'm pretty sure Achilles was quite aloof because he was in his superior power, and yet even the mighty can fall. And even the most ingenious people who have every right to be really quite confident and ambitious, if they're not listening to their warnings, and by warnings I'm actually thinking your internal warnings, your intuition, we could have that, you know, pride comes before a fall. So to me, this is, you know, to activate the energy of this new moon, we need to be actively choosing being in a sense of compassion for the whole world, even people we don't agree with. How can we still find that sense of flow that flows from me to you, to the person next to you, to people around the world? Like, how can we all regain this sense of community and this sense of connection? Because when we're in that empathic consciousness, that actually gives us more power to choose what is right for us. So some really big themes. Last theme that I see with this, and this is the Sabian symbol, is at 6 degrees, which gets rounded up to Gemini 7. It's an old-fashioned well, so I'm going to read it out. This symbol implies going into the depths of people, places, and things in order to find nourishment or satisfaction. There is always a plentiful supply for all those who draw on the well with sincerity. You're able to access this through your faith and confidence in yourself. You don't need to employ your thoughts as much as your beliefs in this situation. The inner wisdom you seek has been tapped by others long ago. Tapping into the well may require a long rope and patience, but is worth the effort. Compassion and love allow one to plumb the depths of people and situations with certainty, being supported by people and your environment, clarity of thought and perception, deep and sustaining links to the past, the pool of universal experience, water and wells. Whew. So, yeah, to me, this is really talking about, you know, and I don't know what you're making this mean, but, you know, where I see this as, you know, this new moon is absolutely amplifying a new sense of thought and a new sense of where we are right now, what might be about to happen, what might be about to occur in the world. And that might be coming from the changes that are going inside you. So this sense of anticipation, something new is coming about. And to really get to the inner wisdom that you're seeking right now, you may well need that compassion and love, that gong energy, to plumb the depths of people and situations with certainty, to really know what's going on. So tapping into the well of whatever it is that you are requiring could require a long rope and patience, but it's worth the effort. But this is a degree that, you know, where this new moon is happening is at a degree of clarity in thought and perception. And these deep and sustaining links to the past is interesting, isn't it? You know, this is, I think, really disconnecting us from the past and moving us into a new future quite quickly. And it's also talking about the pool of universal experience, waters and wells. So, yeah, right now, seeing this, I'm wishing I lived with my own water source. Very recently, we had a blackout in Portugal. The whole of Portugal and Spain were without electricity, thankfully, for, you know, only about 9 or 10 hours. But it was pretty significant, you know, that there was no power. We were very fortunate that in our municipality, our water had some kind of pump that, I don't know, it had something going so we could still draw water. But, you know, in an actual blackout, you know, when the power and the energy goes, that's it, your water source is gone. So reading this makes me think, time to really watch the water. So yeah, interesting, not trusting advice based on established ideals. So this is really about thinking for yourself, really, truly, and also keeping your water, like people say, keeping your powder dry, keeping your water clear, and avoiding stagnant water and poisons. So I'm going to leave that there. I hope that was helpful for you in understanding some of these energies coming up around the time of the new moon. If I can be of any help, then just get in touch. I also do have a membership, which may well be of interest to you. As you may know, every 2 weeks, I do a forecast for all 12 signs of the zodiac. And it takes you from the new moon to the full moon, and from the full moon into the new moon. I also do additional readings for my members, which is a love reading, like relationships and connections, and also a money reading, which is about your career and your ambition and all the opportunities that come up. So, have a look. If anything, if you'd like to work with me in any way, shape or form, or are considering getting access to my additional readings, all of the information is down below. All you need to do is just click into the description fields underneath this video and check it out. But anyway, have a fantastic new moon in Gemini, and hopefully we'll be in touch or connected in some way. Lots and lots of love to you wherever you are. Bye for now.